Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. I'm your host, Beth Stallwood, and I'm here today joined by Catherine Stothart, author, leadership development expert, and a really interesting conversation here around things like how do we get on with people at work? How do we avoid some of those conflicts that don't help us get the best out of ourselves or other people, don't get the best results? And how do we think about motivation? What motivates us? What motivates other people? How do we make sure we've got that sense of purpose in what we're trying to do each day? Catherine has a great long career working with some great organisations and helping them as a coach and as a facilitator. And I really enjoyed this conversation and took lots away from it. I hope you do too. Here it is. Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by the wonderful Catherine Stothart for our conversation. But rather than me introduce Catherine, I'm going to hand over to you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you, Beth. Gosh, that's quite a big question, really.
I know.
Okay, so going back to the very beginning, I was born in Cardiff, so I'm Welsh, went to a comprehensive school, got a place at Oxford University to study English, which I loved. Left university, joined Ford Motor Company on their graduate training scheme in HR, but at the time they called it industrial relations, and it was a lot of industrial relations and strikes and stoppages and stuff. Spent 4 years at Ford. Then I joined Mercury Communications, the first company allowed to compete with British Telecom, still in HR. So that was a small startup company. I love that. Had to leave there because of my husband. So in the meantime, I'd got married, and we'd moved because of my husband's job from the London area to the northwest. So I left Mercury and joined ICL, British Computer Company, now owned by Fujitsu, and I was HR manager at their factory in Ashton-under-Lyne, and then their mainframe development centre in West Gorton in Manchester. Then I had a son, and had I stopped work 6 weeks before he was born, went back to work when he was 3 months old. In those days, the maximum maternity leave was 6 months anyway, and I just felt I should go back. Anyway, went back to work when he was 3 months old, and carried on with that for a couple of years. Then got married, had another child. Well, no, got pregnant. I'll put this in the right order. And second time I had 6 months maternity leave, so I took the full amount. Coincidentally, we relocated again back down to the south for my husband's job. And then I went back to the same company, ICL, but in a different role. So instead of being an HR manager, I went into leadership development, which I absolutely loved. And I've been in leadership development ever since. And from a personal point of view, I could do that part-time. So I worked 3 days a week and had the other 2 days a week with my sons, which was a lovely combination. And I felt that suited me a lot, and suited them, hopefully, as well. Then what happened then? Then we went abroad because of my husband's job. Again, he worked for Shell. So we lived in Cairo in Egypt for 3 years.
Wow.
And that really opened my eyes to cultural differences and different behaviours and stuff. So our sons were 5 and 3 when we went there. Came back from there, and I did some work on a self-employed basis for a couple of years. Then we went abroad again, this time to Brazil.
Wow.
We lived in Rio de Janeiro for 2 years. Again, our sons were with us. And at that time I'd started doing a master's degree by distance learning with Birkbeck in organisational behaviour before we'd gone to Brazil. So I carried on with that, and I did my dissertation and research project in Brazil. And then came back from Brazil in 2002, so just over 20 years ago, and have been in Chester, where I'm sitting at the moment, ever since. And I suppose over those years, my work has evolved, but I've been self-employed. I work through my own limited company since 2004. And I started off doing a lot of assessment work, but then I qualified as a coach. So now I mainly work as a leadership coach, and I run workshops team building workshops. And in the last few years, well, I've been working with Airbus for 10 years. Airbus make the wings for the Airbus aircraft in Broughton in North Wales, just down the road from where I live. And they fly them on a plane called a beluga, which is shaped like a beluga whale. They put the wings in, they load them through the front of the plane, and they fly them to Toulouse, where they assemble them to the aircraft body. So anyway, I work with Airbus as a leadership coach, been working with them for 10 years. And since COVID, I've also been working with Google, delivering virtual training in coaching skills for line managers. So I love it. I love that as well, because, they really get to see and experience the power of coaching. So that's my sort of work career with a bit of my personal stuff intertwined. Obviously, my sons are now grown up, and I've always liked sport. So I play tennis. I've just started golf, but I fit it all around work and, of course, writing books. So I've got two business books that I've published. First one came out in 2018, How to Get On with Anyone, published by Pearson. And then the second one came out, published by Routledge at the end of last year, and that's called Motivation, the Ultimate Guide to Leading Your Team.
And as you know, to talk about.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, and as you know, as you're an author yourself as well, Beth, you know how much authors are expected to promote their books.
Yes.
Being active on LinkedIn and Twitter and doing talks and also and writing articles and all sorts of stuff. So that actually is quite, I enjoy all of that, but it does take time. So, So that's how I spend my time now. Bit of work and a bit of book promotion and a bit of personal stuff as well.
I love it. It's such a really interesting story as well. And as you were talking through your career story, I was like, oh, I want to ask you about this. And I want to ask you about that. So is it okay to dive in with some questions?
Yes.
Excellent. My first question, I'm not sure if it's a question or more of an observation to talk about, isn't it interesting how sometimes our careers are led by other things that happen versus us deciding to go and do stuff?
Yes.
And I think it's a really interesting one. We often think that these are nice, neatly planned out. In 5 years' time, I'm going to go and do this. But so many different factors are involved. And for you, obviously, you moved and travelled because of your husband's work. But that actually determines some of your career moves at certain points in time.
Yeah, definitely. And I will add just one point. Our very first move, he moved for my job. So I don't want it to sound like I was the typical wife just following my husband around.
No.
Yeah, when I worked for Ford, I was sent to Halewood in Liverpool, to the factory there. So he actually relocated from London up to the northwest then as well. So he's done a little bit of his share as well. But no, absolutely. And I don't think, well, it's not for me to tell other people what they can or can't do. But personally, I don't think you can plan your career or your life in detail. You can have a rough idea of, what you might like to do, or, you should know what you enjoy doing, what your talents, what your skills are, what you enjoy versus what you don't enjoy. But then I think it's a case of being open to opportunities.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure you have to be open-minded, but also, not just grab them because they come. You have to think, well, is this right for me at the moment? And obviously when we had the first chance to go abroad to Egypt, as I had two toddler sons, it seemed like, oh, well, okay, it won't be so bad having to give up my career for a few years. And actually, I probably would gain, and I in fact did gain lots of other really fascinating experience and useful experience. So, yeah, I mean, earlier on he'd been offered a job in New Zealand, and we turned that down because I wouldn't have been able to work there. I wasn't a nurse and I wasn't a computer programmer. And in the 1980s, that's all they were interested in. So we turned that one down, because that wasn't right for us at that time. But I think being open to whatever comes up is a good philosophy, really.
I really agree with that, especially around, I think it's good to have some kind of direction. And I definitely, as you know, think it's really good to think about, where do you get your joy from at work? We wouldn't have this podcast if I didn't think that. And what do you follow and where do you go? But I also think that so many things change. And if I think about, 20 years ago, half the jobs that people are in now commonly didn't exist 20 years ago. And in 20 years' time, there'll be jobs that didn't exist. And I don't think we should limit our talent and limit our thinking by saying, I want to do this, then this, then this, then this, and kind of being very structured about it. But there's stuff that you can do to help you with your career. Like you went, you did a master's and you did all these different things and had different experiences that sent you off in different directions. But actually, our careers are so flexible now compared to how they were 20 years ago. And the opportunities are almost endless.
Yes. Yeah, completely. And as you said, you've got to, I enjoy learning anyway. So doing the master's degree, doing my coaching qualification, I enjoy doing those. And yeah, you've just got to always be thinking, what am I missing? Well, not what am I missing, but what's out there? What would I like to learn, or how can I enhance my skills? But again, not in the sense of forcing yourself to do something you really don't want to do, but doing things that you do enjoy. And when you do stuff that you enjoy, opportunities, I think, often come your way.
Yeah. And for me, I think there's something around if you can add what you enjoy and what you're good at, that makes a massive difference. Because sometimes we get stuck in careers where we're really good at it, but we don't enjoy it so much.
Yes.
And I think that's a really interesting one. And it's like, I don't enjoy this. I'm really good at it. So I get praised for it and I get promoted for it. And I'm like, oh, but I'm stuck here and I don't really want to be doing it anymore. But
Yeah.
always ways to move into different things. And sometimes it's an adjacent thing. So when you move from being an HR manager into leadership development, they're kind of adjacent. They're part of a bigger thing about people and development.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But it's not exactly the same career path as you continued on in the HR manager world.
No, that's right. And I'd always had this inkling that I liked the developmental side, the more creative side. But, I also felt, well, I need to get the basis of HR and do the tougher side of HR first. So, yeah, and I think that thing, I've got a little 4-box matrix, actually, which is about enjoy and not enjoy, and do well and don't do well.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting doing that mapping for yourself.
Yeah.
People often see me as, a good organizer and so on. But do I like organizing things? No, I don't.
Exactly.
So I've just recently organised an online conference for BAPT, the British Association of Psychological Type. It's basically people who are interested in Jungian psychological type. It's a charity. And I organised an online conference over 2 days with 24 speakers and different sessions and all sorts of things going on. And it worked really well. And people kept commenting afterwards how well organised it had been. Does that make me feel good? Well, I suppose in the sense of, nothing terrible happened and everyone's happy. But it didn't make me feel full of joy.
No.
Whereas for me, writing something or knowing that somebody's bought one of my books, or I've done a coaching session and they've really got some insights out of it, that gives me joy. I feel then that I'm using my talents more fully, really.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because often we get praised for the things that aren't the things that would make us feel good. They're like, yeah, that's just the basic bit, or it's just is what it is. And actually, it's something about leadership, isn't it, here? As a leader, if you can work out what people actually, where their talents are, what they want to be great at, and work on feedback on those things, the amount of joy you could bring them is really different. And the level and depth of what that could do for that person is different.
Oh, completely. And in a way, that's what my second book, Motivation, The Ultimate Guide to Leading Your Team, is about. It's about how you as a leader can tap into what gives people a sense of purpose. What makes them feel this is why I'm here. This is what I'm here for. This is what I need to do.
Yeah.
And if you can do that as a leader, then you've won the battle, probably.
Yeah. And can we dive into this now? Because I think this is a really interesting thing, isn't it, around leadership and around actually, even if you're not a leader in the sense of a hierarchical leader, we can all be leaders in our own worlds and what we do and how we work with people. Yeah. And I really like what you talk about here around this. How do we tap into people's sense of purpose? Mm-hmm. And one thing that I always think about when it comes to purpose is there's often this message that purpose has to be this grandiose, big old thing that, I must change the world, or and we have to be really rich to have purpose, or we have to be able to have loads of influence over the world. But actually, from my perspective, I'm really interested in hearing yours. Purpose can be tiny. It could be a micro purpose. It could be something about that day. It could be something about your family. It could be something around, achieving one small thing.
Yeah.
And I think purpose often gets misconstrued as this massive, big change the world thing. So tell me about what you think about purpose.
I completely agree with you, actually. For me, purpose is what gets you out of bed in the morning, to use a cliche. So that could be, I quite like my garden. So, it might be, right, today I'm going to go and plant some green bean seeds in the garden or whatever. Going on to slightly bigger things, 2 years ago, my purpose was to write my latest book. That was something that kept me motivated. But we have core needs. So part of our purpose is to do things that meet our core needs. And what I mean by core needs is we all, as human beings, we all share a need to belong.
Yeah.
To feel part of a group, friends, family, organizations we belong to. So for some of us, that gives us a sense of purpose, feeling that we belong or doing something for our group or our organization gives us a sense of purpose. We all have a need to be competent, to be good at what we do. And again, feeling I'm getting up today because I'm going to enjoy, getting better at something or learning something or helping my colleagues or whatever. So that need for competence. And then the other two core needs that we all have, and this is based on research, I haven't just made these up myself, are the need for freedom, to have some choice and control over what we do, and the need to fulfill your potential. That's the top of Maslow's hierarchy in a sense, that self-actualization, or to help other people fulfill theirs. So those four core needs also provide purpose for us. And, if I think about myself, that need, I've got, I would say, quite a high need for competence. I do like to be good at things, which is probably why I've ended up writing some books. But even in my social life, even playing tennis, I like to be good at it.
Yeah. I am not as good as I want to be at tennis, for sure.
I saw a photograph of you with a tennis racket in your hand.
You did. I did work in tennis for 6 years as well. So right. I am. I've got a really decent forehand if I'm playing with someone who knows exactly where to put it to enable that to happen.
Yeah.
So if I play with somebody good who knows what they're doing, my forehand is really good. My serving is hilariously funny, and my backhand doesn't really exist. So I'm good at bits of it, but not good at all of it.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And and that's why I give that example of tennis as an example of, I want to be competent at it, but belonging to a tennis club also fulfills other needs for me. For example, that need to belong.
Yeah.
So, what you choose to do in your life, what you do with your time is usually, if you can meet those core needs through what you do, whether it's at work or in your life outside work, then you've got more chance of being happier, having greater well-being and feeling motivated.
Yeah. These four core needs as well, I'm sitting here thinking, for all of us, what we need more of and don't need so much of will be different, right? So we all vary slightly. So some people may be more about the belonging.
Yeah.
Other people might be more about kind of helping other people fill their potential than maybe around being competent about stuff. So actually understanding where you're driven and how these things really help you. So for me, I like to be good at stuff. As well. Like I think maybe there's something about authors and wanting to be good at stuff. But I also like to try stuff out because I really love the learning process. Like I actually enjoy that uncomfortable, I'm not good at this moment, to be able to get to that, okay, this is how you do it moment. And belonging, definitely, but not all the time. Like I don't, some people have real FOMO about not being with people or doing stuff. So again, mine fluctuates depending on who I'm with and what I want to do. And I'm just sitting here thinking, and tell me if I'm wrong here, that if we're not getting our core needs met, is that where we start feeling really uncomfortable, or like that we're not working in the right way, or like things are just not good?
Yes. And it's when you start to feel demotivated because you haven't got that sense of purpose that comes from meeting those core needs. So you start to feel demotivated, you don't enjoy what you're doing, you don't enjoy your work. And that obviously then can affect your well-being and even your mental health. And I think the other reason it's important to know about these things, so as you said, those four core needs, we all share them all. But typically one might be more important to each of us. So if you're a leader, it will affect your leadership style. So if you're a leader with that competence as a very high core need, then probably you're going to be someone that likes to innovate, find new ways of doing things, introduce new processes and new systems and things. If you're a leader with a high need for, say, freedom, then you might be really good in a crisis, in an emergency, in getting things done quickly, tactical, those tactical skills. So it affects your own leadership style. So it's, as a leader, you need to know that. And it also affects how you judge others. And what I found early on in my career is that I expect, as a manager, I expected the people who worked for me to be like me.
Yeah.
And if they weren't quite like me, then I think, well, they're not so good then, and obviously as you mature and, realize that people bring different talents and skills. And actually, as a leader, you need to have that diversity of background, skills, talents, styles, all these different things to really get the best out of everyone.
Yeah, and it's so funny that affinity bias comes up so often, doesn't it, in organizations where people recruit in their own image. They get people who think like them, who talk like them, and then you miss out on the diversity and the power of the different thinking and different styles. So as a leader, you need to understand your own and be willing to accept that other people have different styles and be able to work with their different styles and what their preferences are.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Otherwise you get groupthink.
Yeah.
And you don't get it's Matthew Syed, isn't it, who has a book. I've got it on my book. I've read it. Is it Rebel Ideas?
Rebel Ideas,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good book, and it really reminds us, and it's got lots of great examples in it. It really reminds us of how important diversity of thinking is.
Yeah.
As
and what goes wrong when you don't have it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And it's so easy, isn't it, for us to kind of this bias we have to assume that everyone else thinks in the same way that we do. It's like, well, why wouldn't they think that's important? Because I think it's important, but it might not be as important in their world.
That's right. Yes. And there's often, and that leads to conflict. So, I've talked quite a bit about people with the higher need for competence. If you've got people who, say, have a particularly high need for belonging, and that doesn't necessarily mean, a party animal, but it just means I want to feel part of this team, part of this community. I want us to respect tradition. It's really important to me to do my duty, to be reliable, be responsible. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. If we're making changes, let's just do incremental change. Now that approach can conflict with the other people who have this need for competence to introduce new ways of doing things, want to throw out everything and start afresh. And those different, underlying different core needs lead to different behaviours and ultimately can lead to conflict. And actually, of course, in any change, you need both those approaches and other approaches too. No one way is the answer. You need to cover off all angles to introduce change or whatever in the best way.
In that conflict is often where people find what I call the work gloom. It's a source of things that make people not feel good at work. Yes. Conflict, people having different ways, people wanting different things, teams not pulling together. All of these things are things that can create that sense of, oh, I don't like what I'm doing here, or this isn't the right place for me, and I can't be myself here. I can't be successful here in the way that works for me. So totally, it makes total sense. And I think it's a really interesting way of us looking at kind of these four things. How are my needs currently being met? What else might I need? And actually, I'm big on, and we are like the whole WorkJoy theory of life is that actually you've got to take some personal responsibility for this. So if you haven't told your boss the kind of things that you need, how on earth are they going to give it to you?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a responsibility on the leader, of course, but I also think there's a responsibility on the individual. If you're there going, I'm not having this belonging need met right now because I'm not being invited to this meeting that would actually really help me, I would say go and ask for that and say, this is really important to me. Can we make this happen? Now, the worst they can say is no.
Yes.
And if they say no, you know where you stand. And I always think a no is just another bit of information to help you with whatever you need.
Yeah.
But actually, so often when I'm working with people who are finding that tension, just opening up that line of communication and being clear about what it is you need and why you need it and why it's important to you allows more opportunities to do things well.
Yes. And that's why one-to-ones are so important.
Yeah.
Because if you and when I coach managers, I'll say, look, a one-to-one, it's not a formal thing. This is like a chat. This is where you sit down, you ask your member of staff, well, how are things going? What have you been working on? What problems have you had? Is what can I help you with? What do you enjoy about your work? It's a chance to get to know them, help them with any issues that they've got, but also it'll give you that sense of perhaps where their talents are not being used, or where they need more support, or maybe where some aspects of their roles need to be taken on by other people. Whereas new managers often feel a one-to-one, oh God, it's like an appraisal. You've got to
Yeah.
sit down, you're judging the person, and it shouldn't be. And actually, if you do regular one-to-ones like that, in that sort of more relaxed, informal, collaborative way, then when you come to do your annual appraisal, if organizations are still doing annual appraisals, it's a
Lots
lot
are.
easier. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot are, but I think they're changing.
Yeah.
And
And I agree with you on the one-to-ones, a quality one-to-one with a conversation about style and preferences and what's working and what's not working, versus a rush through a to-do list,
mm,
or a form, the other end of the scale is the formal, I'm judging your performance here. If you can have those really good conversations, get to know each other, understand what works, find some compromise, because there's always going to need to be some middle ground somewhere about what's working and what's not working.
hmm
And actually, what you are right, a great one-to-one is a great thing. A
mm,
bad one-to-one is an awful thing.
yes, yes,
They
and
can go either way.
and yeah, that's right. And often, we're all busy, and often it's easy for a manager to say to their member of staff, well, do you need a one-to-one? Should we bother having it this week? Oh no, good, fine, we won't have it. But that's a missed opportunity for that manager, actually, to get
Yeah.
to know the person, and so on. And it's a missed opportunity for the person to take the responsibility that you were just talking about, and put their hand up and say, well, actually, I'd like to do such and such, or I'd like to go to that meeting, or could I help with XYZ?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. So a great opportunity to do it, and to do it really well.
mm.
So it's really interesting, and I think we could probably talk for hours about kind of like motivation and working through it. And obviously, there's more in your book that people could go and read
Mhm.
and find out more about this. I'm also really interested in your first book
Mm.
as well, because again, interpersonal relationships, how to get on with people, big source of work joy if you can get it right, big source of work gloom if you don't get it right.
Mhm.
Talk to me a little bit about, how do we do this thing of getting on with everybody?
Yeah, so
just in like 5 minutes, can you explain the whole theory for me?
I'll try. So in a way, my starting point is that gap between your intention when you communicate and the actual impact you have. So,
Mm,
when we communicate with somebody else, whether it's in work or outside work, we usually have a positive intention. We don't set out to be awkward or difficult or irritable or whatever. But sometimes the way we come across, our impact, can be negative on the
yeah.
other person. And my book is really about, how do you close that gap? How do you become more aware of how you're coming across and
Mm,
able to manage that? And also, how can you be more aware of what the other person needs from you, even if they might be annoying you a bit? What is their positive intention that's underlying their possibly negative behavior? So it's about the book is about the 4 styles that we tend to fall into when we interact with others. So I won't go through the detail unless you want me to, but basically the 4 styles, each of them,
yeah.
has an intention. So I'll just give one as an example. So people with the mobilizer style, their positive intention is to get things done. Get things done
Yeah.
quickly. Let's make quick decisions. Let's get on. Let's go ahead. Let's keep moving. Um, Unfortunately, that can sometimes come across as impatient, demanding. If the person they're speaking to starts saying, well, asking questions or throwing out objections, the mobilizer, if you're in the mobilizer style, you can feel frustrated, impatient, you can become demanding, and that obviously then has a negative impact on the other person, and the gap between you gets bigger rather than closing.
Yeah.
So the book is about the 4 styles that we tend to fall into when we interact, so that people can identify their own style and be more aware of the good points of it, the positive sides, the positive intentions, but also the sometimes negative impact. But it's also then about recognizing the styles in other people and picking up what do they need from me. So if you're working with someone who's a mobilizer, who's, pushing to get things done, then they'll be looking for you to say things like, okay, yeah, I'll get back to you by 5 o'clock tonight. Or, yes, I'll get onto that straight away. Or, I can't do that now, but I'll look at it tomorrow morning. They want to know that things are moving ahead and things are happening. Whereas often, if you naturally have a different style yourself, you might be more inclined to say, oh, well, that's a bit complicated. I need to have a think about that.
Yeah.
And then they
instant red rack to a bull.
Yeah. And then the person with the mobilizer in a drive that just finds that frustrating and thinks that you're being unhelpful. Well, actually, you're not really. You do need to go away and think about it, but you don't have to tell the mobilizer all the ins and outs of your thinking.
So they just want the bullet point version.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the book describes the 4 different styles and how to be more aware of your own style and how to pick up cues from other people so that you can respond more appropriately, and then, close that gap and, minimize the potential for conflict, because again, as we were talking earlier, there is potential for conflict between the different styles. And I remember many years ago, I was working in ICL in leadership development, and we were a team and we were putting together a new leadership development program. And I think this is one of the first instances where I became aware of really aware of these differences. And one of my colleagues wanted to push ahead and get something done by a certain date. I don't naturally have that style, although I do like getting things done. I wanted to, well, hang on, we need to think about this. What theory underpins our approach to leadership? What tools and techniques are we going to teach them and that will be helpful to them? I wanted to take time for the thinking first before I committed to a date.
Yeah.
Whereas she wanted to get the date committed and we'll do whatever. And whatever we do will be good enough. That was her intention, if you like. Mine was, no, it's got to be the best result.
Yeah.
Now, in a business organization, things don't always have to be the best possible result. But we had quite a lot of conflict between us because of our 2 different styles. And I think if I'd known then what I know now, I would have dealt with that situation differently.
It's making me giggle because early on in my career, I work with a colleague who is now actually 20 years later, one of my best friends. Mm-hmm. And we are so different in style. It's funny. And we used to laugh about the fact that we'd go into team meetings, and we did basically the same job, worked on the same team. We'd go into the meeting and she would come in with like 27 folders and paperwork and thinking and prep and all this kind of stuff. And I would go in with like a pen and a post-it note to take my actions away with. Now, that could have caused us loads of conflict, but what we really did is we really worked on, hang on, together we are greater than the sum of our parts.
Yes.
Because you've got all this thinking and history and you've got it there and you've got all the kind of reflective practice. I've got all the kind of energy and the let's get stuff done and let's make it happen. So we worked out a way of being really successful by utilizing those differences. But it would have been easier for us just to be in conflict all the time, because I'd have been like, let's get on with it. And she'd have been like, no, we're not ready. But actually working together on that and finding the middle ground, we came up with better stuff because of it.
Yes, absolutely. And I see this quite a lot in Airbus with the sort of operational managers who are responsible for making sure the wings of the aircraft get made, you know, on spec, to time, to quality and to cost and everything. They'll get frustrated if there's a breakdown or some problem. They pull in the engineers, the quality engineers or the electrical engineers or whoever it might be, and they naturally often have a different style, and they want to go away and think about the problem. And that causes so much conflict because, the operational people just want an answer. Tell me the answer now. Do it now. And whereas the engineers want to make sure it's done properly and they've fully investigated the problem and they've come up with the right solution. So again, you can overcome these differences once you know them, once you're aware of them. And the engineers, and some of whom I've coached, and these are quite, I call them engineers, they're quite senior, they're managers, they're quite senior people. You coach them to tell the others what they're going to do and when and so on, rather than leaving it open-ended.
Yeah.
So there's very simple things you can do to get on better with your colleagues by responding to what they need from you. in the
Yeah, and
right
it's
way.
almost kind of taking it outside of yourself and kind of going, okay, my natural reaction would be to do this, but that's not what they need. And if I react in that way, we're going to cause a problem. So how do we know each other well enough? How do we understand each other's needs? How do we also, I think the thing is as well, there are always great features of different styles, aren't there? And there's like the when you're at your best and when you're at your worst factor.
Definitely. Yeah.
And we always know if you are one of the people who has more of that style, you want to get stuff done, you want to do it, that for other people who are having a bad day is a horrendous thing to experience. It's like, can you just give me a break?
Yes.
Could you give me 5 minutes of thinking time before I do something? Equally, if the person who does have that kind of let's get stuff done vibe is constantly with we're going to delay this, and it feels like they're not being successful because of it, that's going to have a major impact on how they feel about things going on.
Yes.
So I love the idea that you describe this as it's not about all these different styles. It's actually about how do you close the communication gap between the styles and understand that.
Yes. And actually with these styles, and they're called interaction styles, we can adopt different styles, and we naturally do. So although my natural style isn't that mobilizer one, when I'm in a hurry or when there is an urgent deadline, yes, I'm in that style, and I can come across as impatient and so on. So we flex, and it's a bit like one of the styles is known as the energizer style, and we all have that energy when we're hosting a party, for example. So we all have that sort of enthusiasm and persuasive and expressiveness. We can all do it when we're hosting a party, but even if it's not our natural style.
Yeah.
So it's another reason why it's useful to know about these styles, because we do naturally do it, but this makes us more aware of it.
Yeah.
And it's picking the right style for the situation. So obviously you wouldn't use the energizer style, that sort of enthusiastic, engaging style when you're, I don't know, making somebody redundant, say. You need the more calm, considered, careful, reserved almost approach.
And I always think of it as like these styles, you have, I would call it like a default mode, like factory settings.
Yes.
This is my factory setting mode. But like you flex depending on the environment, the situation, the context, the people you're working with. And in that flex, it's not saying that you no longer have this preference. It's saying, hang on a minute, we've all got to do different things at different times. There's always bits of our jobs that don't 100% suit our styles. We're going to find the right way to do this at the right time.
Yes, that's right. And I often think of people as, you've got your core, you're who you are at your core, but you build on all these different behaviors and skills and bits of knowledge and so on. And you sort of expand out of your core, and that enables you then to flex depending on the situation, the person, or whatever.
Yeah. So that kind of expansion, the understanding, the learning of how to do these other things enables you to flex more and in the right way.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a fascinating thing, isn't it, when you think about different personalities and styles. But from what I know and around WorkJoy, that is a core source of struggle and gloom for people when they can't get on with people at work. And actually having that understanding of different styles and seeing where people might be coming from and just respecting that and kind of going, okay, well, that's where you're coming from, this is where I'm coming from, how do we close that gap? Versus we can never close this gap, we're too different.
Yeah. So, and in a way, that's why the book was called How to Get On With Anyone, because, you probably can, if you're prepared to, if you need to, you probably can get on with almost anyone. But often we don't have, that need. There's no requirement to, so we give it up and we just say, oh, there's a personality clash, or oh, I don't like so and so. But actually, if you need to, you can, I think, get on with most people.
Yeah, I think so. And I also think there's a difference, isn't there, between negative conflict and conflict that helps you move forward, like conflict done in a really structured, powerful way. So we've got conflict here because we're different. What if we work together through that and actually we come up with something better because of that difference and conflict we might experience, but working through it versus using it as a reason to pull apart?
Yes. And I mean, conflict, you need a certain amount of conflict or disagreement or, different perspectives, shall I call it, to get the best solution. If everybody just agrees, it's probably not the best solution.
No.
Or they may be pretending to agree. I mean, people do sometimes avoid conflict just by appearing to agree with you, but actually they go off and they go and do their own thing anyway.
Yeah. Do their
So
own thing, or say, oh, I never agreed with that in the first place.
yeah,
So you just wanted some peace. So people do that agreeing factor. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think it's definitely one that anybody could learn more about and have a better working life because of it. But especially if you're in a position of leadership and trying to encourage people, motivate people, get a job done in the right way, it's definitely something worth looking at, isn't it? And understanding different people's styles and preferences.
yes, yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
Right, I'm going to move us on to some quick
Okay.
fire questions. Are you
Oh, right.
ready?
Yes. Okay.
Right. First question. What is always guaranteed to bring you a little bit of work joy?
I think having enough time to do the things that use my talents, the things that
Yeah.
energize me. You can't, in any job, you're never going to have, spend 100% of your time doing the things that you really enjoy. You're lucky if it's over 50%, really. But that's what brings me work joy, having enough time to do the things that really energize me, whether that's coaching, running workshops, writing. Um, and can I add another thing, actually, which
Of course
is
you can.
when somebody says to you, oh God, that coaching session, that really changed something for me. Or,
Mm,
that workshop, the team is working so much better now. I mean, I love that, because then you
yeah.
feel that all that effort that you've put in, and, all the knowledge and expertise that you're drawing on when you run something for them, that it's been worthwhile because it's made a difference for them. So yeah,
Yeah.
that brings me work joy as well.
Brilliant. What book are you currently reading?
um, I've just come back from holiday, and I finished the book, and I haven't really started a new one. So the book I was reading last week on holiday was All the Light We Cannot See, by somebody called Anthony Doerr, Doerr.
Ah,
It came out about 8 years ago, I think. It was given to me as a Christmas present. It was really great. It's set in the Second World War in Saint Malo, and it's the stories of a French blind girl and a German young man who's in the German army. And there's a lot more to it than that, but it was amazingly well written. I couldn't put it down. It's but also what was sort of troubling in a way is just that the things that happened in the Second World War, they're now happening again in Ukraine.
yeah.
Why do human beings not learn from experience?
Yeah, and
Uh,
it sounds like a great one. I've not actually heard of it, so I'm going to put it on
no,
my list.
yeah,
But this is the thing, and it was so interesting because I almost said it at the beginning. I was like, "No, we'll get into your career." Is that you talked about kind of going into industrial relationships and industrial
mm,
relations and strikes and things? We're like, well, we're kind of back in that zone a bit right now with strikes and industrial relations and all this kind of challenges, and these things do repeat themselves, don't they?
yes, I think it's different. It's a different situation now from in the 1980s, actually, and yeah, I think it's very frustrating for people if you have a problem and your employer or whoever won't talk to you about it.
Yeah.
And I do think we've got a bit of that going on at the moment.
Yeah, and we talk about communication gaps, like just
Yeah.
a communication chasm,
Yes. Yes.
like
Yeah.
just refusing to have conversations and
Mm,
move it forward. So
yeah.
very, very difficult times
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now.
So having just finished a book, though, I need another book to read, and I don't know what I'm going to read next.
Oh,
So later on, if you've got any good recommendations of fiction, let me know. I'm halfway through a biography of John Donne, the poet, because he was one of my
yeah.
favorite poets. And I just picked up Paul McGee's book, an older book actually of his, How Not to Worry. Not because I'm a worrier, but because I got a friend who is. And I thought I'm going to read this
Mm,
book, see if I think it might help her, and then I'll give it to her.
love that.
So I've always got a few books on the go, actually.
Yeah, I usually have kind of one fiction and a couple of non-fiction
Mm,
on the go, but I haven't got a fiction on the go at the moment. So so maybe we can ask our listeners to recommend some. We'll put it on the
mm, that'd be
notes. They
good.
could give us some recommendations. Love that.
Yeah.
Right, question 3. What is one piece of advice that someone has given you in your life that you always find yourself coming back to?
So when I was 18, for my 18th birthday, my mother organised a cake for me. and she had a quotation from Pope, Alexander Pope, the poet, because I was into, English literature. She had a quotation from Pope iced onto the top of this cake. And it was something like, act well thy part, there all honour lies. So to me, that's about integrity, doing the right thing. And that's something that I would say I often come back to. So it's not so much a practical piece of advice as a sort of overall guidance for your life in the way. What sort of a person do you want to be? And that comes back to me quite often.
I love that. And like the fact that it's on a cake also sounds pretty good.
Yes. And integrity. I mean, I actually used that quotation about 6 months ago. I was doing a couple of blogs on integrity, but that's what integrity is about. And we need leaders who have integrity.
Yeah,
which
definitely.
is doing their part well, doing the right thing.
Right. Question 4. What is one bit of super practical people could go and do today, tomorrow, the next day, in their working lives that you would recommend people did that would help bring them a little bit of joy in their working day?
One of the things I sometimes say to people is what you do and say influences how other people think and feel. So I think I would just say to people, bear that in mind. Whether it's at home or at work, anything that you do, anything that you say and how you say it influences how other people think and feel. So you have to think, how do I want this person to think and feel? Do I want them to feel annoyed with me or upset or angry or bored? Or do I want them to feel, interested and happy and so on? So that's my one bit of advice. I often have to remind myself of this advice, by the way.
So it's not a game of perfection, but progress.
No, that's right.
Because there are days when maybe we do not get out of bed on the right side. There are days when things are happening when we are not at our best communication-wise.
Yeah.
But actually, that's a bit about kind of thinking about what's coming out of your mouth, isn't it? Before you say it.
And it's also, picking up on what you've just said, it's also about, okay, I'm not feeling great today. What do I need to do to make me feel better?
Yeah.
And for me, that is often get outside. I love being outside. I might just walk outside down the road or into the garden or something. And that lifts my spirits. And then I can come back in and get on with whatever I was struggling with. So
I always think if people have like 3 go-to things, what is the thing that you can do that will always lift your spirits?
Yeah. That would be one. Listening to some music could be another one for me. And of course the classic is, at the end of a day, reflect on what are 1 or 2 good things that happened today, even though some bad things might have happened. And all these things help your mood, help how you feel, and that helps your well-being and your mental health.
And stops you becoming a mood hoover for other people. Because you haven't managed your own mood, and then other people get in a mood because of your mood, and because moody is really catching.
And you want people to catch good moods from you, don't you?
Exactly.
You want to be the sort of person that other people want to be around, not the sort of person that they want to avoid.
Yeah. If people are avoiding you in the corridor, you might want to check your own mood.
Yes.
Definitely. All right. Final question for me, Catherine, is where can people find out more about you in your work?
Okay, so I've got a website, S&Wood, that's ESS for sugar, enwood.co.uk. There's loads of resources on my website. One of the tabs is called the Resource Hub. There's video explainers, there's free templates to download. There's all sorts of resources there. So they can certainly find out a lot more about me and my work there. Brilliant. Obviously, there's LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm on both of those. So please connect with me, follow me on those. And if anyone's interested in buying one of my 2 books, they're both on Amazon. And How to Get On With Anyone is about £9 on Amazon at the moment. The Routledge book is not discounted on Amazon. However, it is discounted if you buy it from the Routledge website with a discount code. Discount codes change from time to time. The current one is EF for Freddie L01. So so that's somewhere else you can go. But please connect with me, and also on my website there's quizzes and things you can do to find out a bit more about your own motivation pattern and so on.
Brilliant. We will put all of those links into the show notes so that people can click on straight through and get in touch and look at some of those brilliant resources. Catherine, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest today. I'm going to be thinking about all of these different things as I go into the rest of my day.
Great. Thanks very much, Beth, for inviting me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Catherine. So many great little bits of advice that I'm going to take away. It's hard to pick one, so I might pick a couple. I think the first thing is to remind ourselves that there are so many different options in our careers, and that sometimes life and the things that we're doing in our lives influence what we're going to do in our careers and how we're going to use those opportunities, take those moments in time and do the stuff that's right for us and follow the things that we are good at and that we enjoy, finding those things together and have that sense of purpose. Really like that idea. And I think the other things to think about are, how do we influence how other people behave through our own behaviour, through what we think and what we say, and how do we understand better how other people are motivated, how their styles work for them, so that we can create more collaborative cultures, so that we can think about leading people really well, and so we can think about taking that personal responsibility for getting what we need in work to feel motivated, to feel purposeful, to feel like our style helps us belong and be part of something. So a huge thank you to Catherine for joining me today. Remember, we have lots of resources on our website too. We have createworkjoy.com. Do head there for our 5-day Where Do You Get Yours WorkJoy assessment tracker, where you will actually find out some of the things that really work for you and how you can do more of them. Do head there and sign up to that. It's a great 5 days. Start whenever you want, give it a go, see how it works for you. And do get in touch. We're on all the socials at Create Workjoy. Would love you to come and follow. And remember to subscribe to the podcast, and it will be there right in your podcast app whenever new seasons and new episodes come out. Thanks very much and have a great rest of your day.